Morning, and thank you for joining Dana's Daily Doodles. I have a reading this morning you might enjoy, and it's a little bit more of a continuance of that wilderness mentality. And I hope you enjoy my pretty tree. It's just there for some joy, a little bit more holiday time as we move into the new year, 2026. Yay! I like numbers even. Weird, I know, but let's just say 2026 is going to be a good year. So we can make changes, we can move into it with a positive outlook. Yes, our wilderness mentality, we can work on that as well. And we all go through different things, never know what someone else is going through. So I'm just going to keep up a bright light and try and be positive, but every day is not simple, right? So my tree gives me a little joy, so I will take that down the day after New Year's. I put all my Christmas stuff away, so that was a little bit of a chore and got that kind of done. So this is the wilderness mentality, and in this last chapter, as we read, we might all be familiar with this. It says, I'm going to do it my way or not at all. That sounds familiar, especially me, 60 years old. I'm going to do it my way, stubborn or not at all. Well, I've been through a lot, as many of you have. I've learned a lot, I've been humbled, and I've lost a lot. And I don't want to make myself the center of attention on this reading. I'm just giving you examples of where I've been and how I've climbed out of a wilderness mentality of stinking thinking. And I've lost my big, beautiful home. And I was in a place in my mind that wasn't healthy. And now, when I look back and think about everything, I could have done things differently. And I could have figured out how to have kept that home one way or another, but losing my marriage, my husband, and then I had to work on myself. And then, with that being said, losing your money, your business, and all of that was pretty much within just a couple of years, if not even that. So when you lose um, and you are found pretty much just struggling to get by, and then my brother had a stroke and needed care. So I was dealing with that with my mom. My mom ended up with cancer. I lost my mom. I had a really nice job and I liked my position and my co-workers, but I left to care for my mom. Then she passed away, and then things changed again, and then the pandemic, and then took care somewhat of my father. When I say took care of, I mean his finances and getting him set up, because he had to go immediately into full-time care, and then he passed away. So now this has been since 2015 and moving forward, moving into 2026. You can see why a person wants to get out of the wilderness and mentality of stinking thinking and just being held and frozen and thinking about what if, what could I have done differently. And, when you lose everything, you just, want to move forward. So, not an easy time, and probably not easy time for you. You have probably a lot of things that you've gone through. So, looking at this chapter, the Israelites displayed much stubbornness and rebellion during their years in the wilderness. Yep, that is precisely what caused them to die out there. They just would not do what God told them to do. The inner feeling of needing change, the inner feeling of knowing that your presence is not at peace. If you've gone through that, how long did it take? It's not an hour or a couple of days, a lot of times. It can be years. That is precisely what caused them to die out there, it says. Dying to oneself, you're so overwhelmed, and you could possibly die from heartbreak and the things that you've been through, but you also can reflect on this and make great change. So it says they just would not do what God told them to do. They would cry out to God to get them out of trouble when they got into a mess. They would even respond to his instructions, and that would come in the form of obedience, but that was probably short lived. And it would say, until the circumstances improved, like I was saying, probably short lived. And I imagine a lot of us do this. We get through that hump and then we're into the next wilderness, right? Then repeatedly, they would go right back into rebellion. So the same cycle is repeated and recorded so many times in the Old Testament that it's almost unbelievable. Have you read the Old Testament? Because that's going to be one of my goals this year. It's just going to be in pieces. I'm going to look at the back of my Bible and I'm going to do exactly what it says. Today I will read these 3 or 4 verses. Think on that, research that, because, it takes time and you need to think on it. You need to look up a lot of the words and just really spend time with yourself. But everything won't come together perfectly, but at least it's kind of like reading a book. I look at the Bible as a life application, everyday life application, a living book, a living Bible. So this way, I'm just going to read it. I'm just going to read it kind of like it's a novel. And so I will see the part where it says in the Old Testament where it's unbelievable because that same cycle repeats and repeats, and it is recorded. And yet, if we are not walking in wisdom, we will spend our lives doing the same thing. Wisdom comes with age. Wisdom comes with growth. It doesn't necessarily, of course, have to be age, but it could come with experiences. And sometimes, when we look at someone and maybe they're, 22 years old or something, I've met some young ladies like that and young men. It's like they have an old soul. They're just kind of born pretty wise. And it's a lot to really look at and appreciate. Uh, I suppose some of us are just by nature a little more stubborn and rebellious than others. True. And then, of course, we must consider our roots and how we got started in life, because that affects us also. So, looking at our roots and how we were raised, most I can't really remember, but my mom was a very strong woman, but primarily out of the home working. But what she did do is what I could see, because I did have a curious mind and I did watch what she did. One was she was beautiful to me, inside and out, is what my little mind thought. I was insecure and I would just watch her and wish that she was home more. I watched her cook and clean and tend to the house and then dress up and leave and go to work. Um, a strong woman, but not there necessarily very much. I was like that latchkey child, and just took care of myself. I had my little brother, I'd mentioned him earlier, took care of him. He's only a year younger, but you'd think 10. And so I watched over him. And so this gal says in the book, I was born with a strong personality and probably would have spent many years trying to do it my way, no matter what. But the years I spent being abused, she shares with us, and controlled as a young child, this is what she went through, added to an already strong personality, combined together to develop in me the mindset that nobody was going to tell me what to do. Have you ever felt that way? Maybe after a bad relationship, bad boyfriend, or even recent, you know, someone at work, and it's like, no, I'm sorry. I'm not doing it your way. I'm doing it my way. So all of those can be examples. Obviously, God had to deal with this bad attitude before he could use me. That makes sense. How he molds us, right? Could be scary. The Lord demands that we learn to give up our own way. There's the word demands, and be pliable and moldable in his hands. As long as we are stubborn and rebellious, he can't use us. Kind of the same thing if you think about it like a teenager, right? You really do try and mold your child and make it pliable and moldable in your own hands as a parent. So we are his children. So that does make perfect sense. I describe stubborn as obstinate, difficult to handle or work with, and rebellious as resisting control, resisting correction, unruly, refusing to follow ordinary guidelines. Both of the definitions described her, and she certainly was, she says. She had suffered a lot in her early life, and it caused a lot of out of balance attitudes towards authority. That does make sense. So sometimes when a lot of things have happened, we are put into a lot of different circumstances, and this creates what we have become. So, softening of our heart, learning, growing, and being pliable and moldable is very important in life to be able to make it in the big world. And also, not only just make it, but find joy in the simple things. So, it's not enough to reach a certain plateau and think, I've gone as far as I am and I'm gone as far as I'm going to go. That's not a good way for growth. It must, and we must be obedient in all things. And this means trying. It means not holding back in anything or keeping any doors in our lives closed to the Lord. Not keeping any doors closed when we're working on ourselves and searching for answers. We want growth in our lives, yes. We all have these certain areas that we hang on to as long as possible. This is true, but I exhort you to remember that a little leavens the entire lump. A little leavens, which is like baking soda, baking powder. And she uses it in the context of if we allow ourselves to get through and open our lives, open our door, and allow growth and allow, if you will, the Lord to come into our hearts, come into our minds, and even take this reading as a growth, then the leavens will take out the lumps. So we all need a little bit of that, right? And I appreciate you joining me today and looking and visiting the battlefield of our minds together, being in the wilderness with our minds. It doesn't mean things will open up and correct itself immediately, but it does mean with trial and error and moving forward and allowing God and allowing the good word and allowing others' love to come into our lives and open doors and show us that we can get out of the wilderness. And if we allow that, then how much, better will we feel when we start to work on this way of thinking and just to help ourselves and become who we want to be molded into. It's just a day to day. And I thank you for joining Dana's Daily Doodles, and I thank you for joining. And we want to think about how rebellious we are and how our stinking thinking can be turned around little by little, or how we can be moldable. And that's a good thought to carry with us as we think about the different things in our past and moving forward, opening good doors to our, our life that will help us and mold us to be that much better of a person and feel better as a person. And please like, comment, subscribe, and follow. as I always say, thank you, so much for being here. And I enjoy this time because not only is it blessing you, I hope, it's certainly blessing me. And a lot of these uh, paragraphs and these chapters I'm reading, this is the first time I've really taken a hard look at it. So I'm working on myself as you might want to work on yourself. So have a great day, and coming up, it's the New Year's, and we can get into a lot of sneaking thinking with that time. So let's do our best to move forward and welcome 2026 in a good way. Thank you again.